This week, I forgot. That's not a blooper, that's an actual subject. Corn and beans are on the rise. Are farmers buying a lot of equipment? Is CFAP affecting their purchases? Also, dressing for the cold, then and now. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. Dave Nelson's over there in Carrington. I'm over here in Thief River Falls. I'm Grant Nelson. It's the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, we were talking before we got on the air, and I just want to start out about memory right away. We were both talking to each other, and I'm like, oh, I had something I wanted to tell you, but I can't remember. But I went through the physical actions I took earlier in the week when I was doing the thing I wanted to talk to you about, and that kind of worked. I mean, it was kind of like a little mind exercise this morning. Do you do anything like that?
Oh man, do I ever. It's really interesting, but sometimes everybody's felt this. You walk into a room and wonder why you're there. And sometimes I have to go back to where I was before I went in the room and retrace my tracks so I remember why I was going there.
I do the same thing. I call it reverse engineering. Like if I walk in somewhere and I've got a tool in my hand or a scissor, whatever, I go, why would I be here with that? And then I figure it out. Because I think sometimes a person's just thinking about something else while you're actually doing the work. I mean, you're maybe sometimes the work is easy enough where you don't have to be totally consumed by it. So you're thinking about something else while you're doing the work. And a person just ends up going off in a side room when you're actually heading for the main room. You know what I mean?
I do the same thing on a computer. If I think about something I want to search for, I'll pull up Google Google isn't so bad, but if you go to Yahoo or something like that, you get there, but there's other stuff there, So all of a sudden, I went there to search for something, and the next thing you're doing is reading an article. And then after that's done, it's like, okay, now why was I here?
Yeah, I've been there a lot. Matter of fact, speaking about memory, I forgot to even do our coffee talk this morning. How's everything going out in Carrington?
It's going pretty good. We had 39 degrees yesterday, so we melted a lot of our little bit of snow that we have. And we're supposed to have another one of them today, so I think the streets will get cleared off today. So it's been a wonderful winter so far. I mean, there's been nothing bad about it, really. And the days are getting longer now, so we're having more sunlight. And it's going to be a winter to remember, I think. I hope its finish isn't too wild, because a lot of times you get a bunch of moisture in March. But so far, been a great winter.
Yeah, it's been fantastic around here. Also, got the snow moved last week, and pretty much everywhere that I moved it now, I can see bare ground where everything's at. So, how about the farmers out there, Dave? Are they feeling positive about the upcoming crop season?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's definitely some big planning going into the next crop season. A lot of it has to do with, of course, corn and soybeans, because there's actually a market based on demand, I believe, right now in both. So, yeah, there's some good planning going on. The increase in prices has really spurred some optimism and some purchasing and so on. So I think they're pretty optimistic.
Well, that's good. It's good to hear. How about, have you been getting some equipment purchases going on there based on maybe increased crop prices, or maybe a little bit of positivity that we're seeing China starting to buy a little bit more stuff, or maybe even a new CFAP? coming out?
Well, the funny part about it is the rumors of corn production next year have spurred a couple of baler purchases for us.
Ooh.
Because people are, they bale a lot of corn stover now with the chop stocks and so on. And so these guys they're worried that there's not going to be straw, because there won't be wheat or something like that. That a lot of cattle farmers, find a way to get straw from a grain farmer, or maybe have some of their own, But so there are a lot of different things that are going on, and most of it's based on rumor or upcoming ideas and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's made a change throughout the whole farming community. The possibilities for next year.
I think usually on corn, isn't the rumor the opposite way? Usually people don't talk about as much corn, and then all of a sudden when it actually happens, they really grow a lot more corn, or at least a percentage more corn than they thought they were going to. Whereas this year they're already talking about corn. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Talking big about corn and beans, some wheat, because wheat has been up and down, in the markets too. But yeah, it's there's a lot of planning going on for next year, and the one thing that we can't plan for, but might throw a monkey wrench into all of it, is the lack of moisture, because we're super dry here, and we will need timely rains this year, and we haven't had that, really lately. I mean, it's been short on rain, and maybe you'll get one big dump over the summer or something like that, but we will need timely rain to get a crop again next year.
We're pretty dry out here too. The one nice thing about that corn crop, it's just fun to see all of that corn coming out of the auger, and it also justifies that last semi and trailer purchased that everybody makes every once in a while, at least. Dave, let's take a quick break here. We'll do my online column. We'll come back with part 2 of the Real Reflections podcast. We're going to talk about dressing for winter then and now. I'm Grant Nelson. This is Real Reflections. Sitting by myself in the early morning hours, it's easy to let my mind wander back in time. There's something about Christmas and winter that creates an open gateway to reminisce about trains. We normally circle the Christmas tree with model trains. Maybe that's the main reason. It's a good subject to focus on as I let my mind slip from where I am to where I originated. Now, I grew up in Viking, a town shaped by agriculture, the pipeline, and the railroad. The location for most communities in this area was due to train service. I interviewed a few people from Viking about 15 years ago, and some of them mentioned that the train was often the only way to get to Thief River Falls or Warren during the winter, or when roads were sloppy in the spring. Farmers would cut wild grass and pack train cars full, which would go off to feed animals in other parts of the country. Mobility was different decades ago. The internet allows most of us to get a taste of almost any area from a laptop computer. Gas is relatively inexpensive, and most people have at least 2 vehicles in the family. I can remember leaving the farm 3 times one summer, so it was a time when people were a bit more isolated. Any element that arrived in the area was greeted with the same interest as perhaps a UFO landing would find today. The train tracks are about a half mile from our yard, so I couldn't see fine detail. However, I could definitely see what kinds of cars were included in that particular unit. The coal cars really got me thinking because I knew they had come from North Dakota. I wondered about the wilderness known as North Dakota, and any element which arrived from out west really got my interest. I'm old enough to remember the old Viking elevator in its heyday, a time when you could get a good bottle of Nesbitt's orange soda, as it was located by the old depot where the train often stopped in Viking. The supplies in the warehouse arrived by train, and there was usually either an auger loading trains or grain draining through the side chute from the elevator itself. I've thought about it, but I can't remember if they ever actually delivered fertilizer to Viking. Now, the occasional application of old model trains around our Christmas tree probably has less to do with trains than the nostalgia I feel about my youth. I rarely run the trains, but prefer to just use them as a focus point as I travel back in time. To think of a time when people were isolated and the arrival of a train was an event makes me smile. I mean, I've come to take each rocket launch from Tesla for granted, and I'm now old enough to contrast this attitude with that of a young man who loved to watch the train, even from a distance. Maybe to gain an appreciation for the time I've been given to experience all these events and their accompanying emotions is an undiscovered gift of perspective of my own memories. I'm Grant Nelson. This is Rural Reflections. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections podcast. Dave Nelson's out in Carrington, North Dakota. Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, I went into the hardware store the other day, and they have something that was really surprising to me, and that is heated clothing. Now, of course, it interests me greatly because there's nothing like a gadget to get my neurons popping, but I don't really need it. I am not outside that much, but I understand the concept. Lighter clothing, heated. You can take the battery from your tool as long as you buy the same line as makes the clothing. You can grab that battery, slap her in there, and you're warm even with a much lighter jacket. But I think now, if you wore that around a bunch of farmers at the cafe, they might be like, what are you doing in here? Get some Carhartt on, do something like that. But for construction, it's a fantastic idea. Have you ever seen any clothes like that?
Well, I haven't really, excepting for stockings. And I actually had a pair of stockings at one time that had 2D batteries in them. Mm. And the pouch that carried the batteries was a major annoyance. And at the time when I thought this was cool, it was probably 40 years ago. But I thought it was really great, except when you put them on. The heating elements were like little hard wires in there, you know, and so it wasn't perfected at the time. But I haven't got anything like that or seen anything like that. But I'm sure it is a good idea for those guys, and it's a great idea for the company that makes it, because they move from not only supplying you with their drills and chainsaws and all that kind of thing up to your clothing. So I'm sure there's a heated pair of boots coming also that probably tie into that, or you can just snap a battery on your heel and there you go.
I like what you talk about the old socks. I'm guessing if they had wires in there, there'd be certain parts of your feet that would have those grill lines like you see on a hamburger, and then there'd be other portions of your foot that were maybe a little bit cold. Is that how it went?
Yeah, I think that was exactly how it went, you know. But it was a great idea, but a little ahead of its time. You know how that stuff is. It comes out, the first people out with some of these things aren't always the ones that cash in on it. The idea guys are the ones that make it, and people that figure out how to mass produce and market it are the ones that make the money.
You know, it's us who buy those things right away. Nowadays, we're called beta testers. Prior to that, we were called early adapters. But back in the good old days, we were just called guinea pigs. And now I want to talk a little bit about those good old days. Anybody who's seen A Christmas Story and seen Ralphie's little brother all bundled up knows maybe a little bit of what it's like to get dressed up for the winter back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, heck, even the 80s. I remember when moon boots came along. I thought those were pretty hot stuff. But prior to any of that, it was typically just layer upon layer upon layer. Just keep grabbing stuff until you get to the point where you can't quite move, Dave, but you were pretty warm except your hands. Your hands are always cold.
Well, yeah, that's how it was. I mean, we used to walk to the bus every morning, yep. And when it was cold out, you got your head wrapped in a dish towel, and it was okay. It helped, but otherwise you had a chance of freezing your cheeks a little or whatever. But we used to go to the bus kind of mummified, and it was. It was what you had that you dealt with, that you did it. I mean, otherwise the option was to be very, very cold.
I think you learned some basics. Like, I knew one thing is mittens are better than gloves because your hands are all together. You can't do as much with them, but boy, they're really good for when you're cold. And also the one thing I found out too was I didn't like wearing long johns. I hated wearing long johns under my jeans. And so, especially if I was out just feeding cattle, I just go quick, like go from the feed bin, and we'd have to carry pails to the barn. So I just moved really quick. Just go fill them up, move them into the barn, and then in the barn, of course, it was tropical. Even at 30 below, it was beautiful inside the barn. I mean, it really felt good. That permeating heat that just reached inside you. And so I just moved quick, and I never worried about it. And then feeding silage, that was indoors, so that was good. Now, if you had to go out and feed the young stock, that was more involved. That was a long period of time out there. Or if you had to take out manure, of course, Dad always did that. But I mean, anytime you had to loiter outside, or if you had to sit on a tractor while it was cold outside, that was a little bit different.
Yeah, I always remember Dad had this old sheepskin coat, and it was shot, yep. But there were some pieces of it that were usable, and they were always the insulation for the steel tractor seat when you went out and spread manure.
That's right.
So you'd see him going out and putting that on the seat first, and then sit down on the sheepskin, and at least that part of you was insulated from the cold of the iron seat.
Yeah, because taking a thermal break between you and steel is a good idea, because there is nothing colder than steel.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, you got anything else for us this week?
No, I guess I'm just going to enjoy the nice week again, and sounds like maybe we'll get a little bit of snow during the week, but we're going to have a couple of high 30s days. Maybe we'll even get to 40 today. I don't know. So I'm just going to enjoy that, and I'm going to look at the Christmas decorations a little bit now that Christmas is over.
Yeah, that sounds like a good thing to do. And we'll send them over for some good warm Case IH gear if it gets any colder. How about that?
Okay, that sounds good.
There's Dave Nelson, my brother out in Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, and this is the Rural Reflections Podcast.